Welcome to Money Mavericks, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of finance, investment, and entrepreneurship.
I'm Kirk Drake.
And I'm Darryl Hicks. Together, we're here to bring you the latest insights, expert opinions from the trailblazers who are redefining success in the financial world. Wow, Dr. David Tuyo. It's amazing to have you on the Money Mavericks podcast.
He's the first doctor we've had, right?
Yeah, he's the first doctor that we've had on the podcast. It's
Can
true.
only go up from here, guys. Can only go up from here. So.
Yeah. Now, we're really excited to have you on, man. Been looking forward to this one. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and have it from a finance perspective. And even before we started recording, we were talking about rates and all this other kind of stuff, and your view, which was very contrarian on that. And I'm excited to kind of unpack some of that with you in a little bit. But maybe a great place to start would be, how in the world do you end up being president and CEO of University Credit Union? Give us the quick bio, but especially would love to kind of hear the origin story on how you ended up where you are.
I guess just jumping into financial services, I started as a financial advisor. I was with a company called Edward Jones, awesome company. Chose to go there straight out of college because they had the best training program. So when you looked at the number of hours that were invested by the company in you, they were like 3x any of the Wall Street firms. And so knowing that I was straight out of school and knew nothing, I needed to make sure I went to a company that could really help me achieve a quick start and understand the markets. I've always been curious about the markets. I mean, from the time I was in sixth grade. And so I guess really on to the origin story, that's really what it started. And so you remember Michael Keaton from Family Ties back in the 80s? Like that was,
Oh, yeah.
I didn't wear the suit and the briefcase, but more or less that was kind of me. So in sixth grade, we had this project where we had to pick a stock and we followed the stock. And so this is before the internet and before email. I know for some viewers, like, wow, that's really, he's old.
But you looked it up in the newspaper?
So I looked it up in the newspaper, tracked it in the newspaper. I wrote to Xerox, requested the annual report, got the annual report back. I did a kind of a summary. I was only in sixth grade, so it wasn't like too detailed, but I still did a summary for the teachers part of the project. And we tracked it. I don't remember if it was like 6 or 8 weeks, but we tracked the stock and it went up. And I thought I knew something when I didn't know anything, but it was still fun, right? And so I know people like don't know what Xerox is or who they are, but it was an awesome time. This is the day where like color printers were like maybe the new thing and new hottest thing. But nonetheless, it was a great project, and that fueled my curiosity for the capital markets and financial services. Got into high school, was part of Future Business Leaders of America, won some financial mathematics competitions, got into college, played golf in college, but I was obviously a finance major, was very passionate about that. And there we started a chapter for students in free enterprise. We launched a couple of companies, got to do a business plan for a new startup that I know this is going to sound interesting, but I went to school in Alabama. I love Alabama. That's where I'm from. It's home. But we had this lawnmower races. And so they had stock modified lawnmower races. They had no business plan. They were trying to get started up and like create this whole circuit. And so they came to us as a business school to do a business plan for them and help them kind of get launched and look at what the market could look like and do an analysis around an environmental scan. And so that's kind of how things got started, right? So this is like really great experience looking back. I'm like, wow, I was really lucky and fortunate along the way to have all these things kind of happen. And so then financial advisor, of course, got to start right when the tech wreck happened, followed by 9/11. You know, people talked about how this was going to be the greatest opportunity for your career. And then they didn't know the Great Recession and the pandemic was going to come too. But from financial advisor, was there for a few years, had a really fast growing office. The company sent people from the United Kingdom and all of the US to come train at my office to kind of learn how I was doing it. And I actually was just doing what they told me to do. I wasn't doing anything truly crazy other than making things a little bit more efficient. And so then from there, went to institutional coverage, worked with treasury companies, pension funds, insurance companies, banks, credit unions. And then I was traveling out on the road. We had our first daughter, our first child. And, one of my clients was a credit union, offered me a job as CFO and said, hey, maybe you want to be a dad and not a paycheck. And I said, that sounds pretty good. And I don't know much about accounting, but I can cover the rest of it. And so, he said, I'll teach you that. So I had on the job training for some of the pieces I was missing. And then thus launched my career. I fell in love with credit unions day one, kind of banking with a heart, if you would, and really doing the right things for people because it's the right thing to do, and trying to create value in a way that's unparalleled in the marketplace and a very unique strategy. And so from there, went to another credit union. And then I was fortunate enough to go work at a company called Power Financial in Miami. Worked for Alan Prindle, CEO there. Got to be CFO and COO there at the same time. So really got to experience the junior CEO role. And then University Credit Union came knocking and said, hey, we'd love to have you be our next CEO. And that was 7 years ago now. And just having a blast, have a great board of directors, have a great team. We're doing some cool things, learning, right? Some of the steps along the way, but we're definitely learning along the way and having a lot of fun doing it. And I've had great success. And I just can't speak enough about the people I get to be around and work with. And even outside the walls of the crate, you can get people like Kirk and yourself. I mean, the industry is really a neat place, and it's unfortunate not more people know about it.
I find it really fascinating too. Like, it's not too common that you see someone who moves on a pretty smooth track all the way through. Like, I have three kids, 17, 14, and 11. And a big part of what my wife and I spend our time thinking about is, like all parents, is how can we really set them up for success as far as a career? Where are they going to go? And the old adage that you hear over and over again, like Bill Gates talked about this, is like, just think about what you're most passionate about and where your hobbies are. And that'll usually get you a really good start, because whatever it is that you just want to go do for fun, just because you love it so much, and it's not about getting paid, there's probably something there that's ancillary. And I just love this story about grade 6 analyzing stocks. And yeah, like no internet back then, right? So like, getting it out of the newspaper and actually writing to Xerox and stuff like that. It sounds like exactly the kind of thing that the CEO and president of a credit union would have been doing when he was in elementary school.
Like the insanity, if we went back to our kids today and we're like, okay, you're going to need to make a financial decision, or any adult today. So you're going to make a financial decision based on a once a week report that comes out in a newspaper. Like, they'd be like, what are you talking about, right? That don't work at all, right? One of the things you said that I thought that was really poignant was the aspect of how Edward Jones had invested in you. What are you doing in that? How are you carrying that forward at your credit?
Looking back, you do a lot of things in your career, and maybe you don't really tie you put the breadcrumbs together to see the trail that led you to the water. But when it comes to training, it's our first strategic posture. So our organization, the very first thing is to invest in people. And so when you look at how we approach training, how we develop our team, because we hire great people and we make them even better. And it really is cultural. But what we do is we make sure and encourage everyone that comes into the organization is going to become certified as a financial counselor. And I don't care if you're in accounting or in IT, if you're in digital strategy innovation, if you're in development, you need to know the foundation of what we do and how we do it and what we're trying to do. You have to know the products and services. How else can you innovate around that to help improve service to your member owners? And so everybody in our organization right now, we're at 91% as far as certified financial counselors. And then also in addition to that, everybody's on a career path where they are going to get certified in whatever specialty they're in. So if you're a cybersecurity engineer, you're going to work on some certifications there. If you're in financial planning, clearly you're going to become a financial planner, or some type of, maybe you do through a series of steps to get there. Maybe you start with personal financial planning and you become a certified financial planner and work your way through that progression. In our finance department, we have a couple CFAs, right? In accounting, we have CPAs. And so again, just in trying to make sure that we continue to have a focus on continuous learning and development, because as we all know, like we talked about here, 6th grade, right? Newspaper once a week. And now we have 24/7 trading, after hours, after markets. You can literally trade anything you want. You can even trade on who's going to be elected the next president. And so these are things that are nonstop in today's world. And if you don't continuously learn, you can be left behind. But it is great to see, again, our team of champions at University of Creighton just really embrace the idea of learning, especially when in the world we get so many things thrown at us. And I don't know what the average attention span is now, but I think last time I heard, like, Google was saying something like 6 seconds or something. So for our team to kind of focus on their development and prepare to serve and be the best Creighton we can be for our member owners and for the university community across the United States, it's a pretty cool thing. But yeah, so it's interesting to see how that ties back to kind of that foundational experience I had at Jones.
What do you think your biggest money mistake has been?
Good question. I think we all are going to say this now looking back, because it's easier to say now than it was then. But, getting into that Roth IRA earlier, that salary cap happens faster than you think. And, the backdoor Roth IRA is a great tool today. Not enough people know about this. If you don't know about the backdoor Roth IRA, look at it, look it up. There are ways where you can use a traditional IRA in a non-deductible fashion to do an immediate conversion into a Roth, get tax-free savings for retirement, and leverage an IRA regardless of your income amount. So there's no limits to that. So it's a pretty cool way to leverage retirement savings. But, I remember going back, when I first graduated college, like my wife and I's date was we going up to McDonald's and maybe having a drink by the pool at the apartment. It wasn't like we had a lot of margin to be able to save into a Roth IRA. But I think looking back, had we had that, obviously that would have been a much better position. But outside that, I think we've done some pretty good decisions. My spouse, life partner of 23 years, is an accountant. So you imagine between my background and her background, we make not as many mistakes probably, but the Roth IRA is one that I still kind of kick myself like, man, if I could have had started that earlier, or maybe if I would have, like, I mean, I started caddying when I was 12 years old, you know what I mean? And I had money, I had savings, like I was saving money on a net basis. And so I could have used that earnings back then to fund that Roth IRA or even a traditional IRA. And, who knows, I might be like Darryl asking the questions instead of just being participating on
Right.
Well, I mean, I think, wasn't it Einstein who said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world? It's one of the lessons that I sat down with my kids and started showing them, like, hey, this is what happens if you start putting aside even a small amount of money at 8 years old versus 11 years old versus 20 years old. And it was even eye-opening for me. We got a little Google sheet that we set up and we just started like saying, how much do you think that you could save? And then, when you move out, you're going to be able to save less, but you can probably, yeah.
All the various personalities in personal finance have their own charts, but like I remember Dave Ramsey had this chart where from 18 to 27, if you save $3,000 a year versus 27 to 65, saving $3,000 a year, which one has more money? And it's substantially larger for somebody that goes 18 to 27, never saves another dime the rest of their life. Goes to 27 goes to 65. And really, to your point, when you see that in a chart, it's right in front of you.
On Money Mavericks, we don't just talk about making money. We explore the innovative strategies and bold decisions that drive real change. Whether you're an experienced investor, a budding entrepreneur, or just someone looking to make smarter financial choices, we've got something for you.
Every week, we're going to sit down with industry leaders, visionaries, and mavericks who share their journeys, challenges, and breakthroughs, from contrarian views on market trends to the secrets behind building a successful startup. You get an inside look at what it takes to thrive in today's economy.
And we promise to keep it real, engaging, and most importantly, actionable. No jargon, no fluff. Just straightforward conversations that you can apply to your own financial journey.
So get ready to challenge your thinking, expand your knowledge, and take control of your financial future. This is Money Mavericks,
where we turn financial dreams into realities and mavericks into legends.
I saw an article when I was somewhere 15, 16 years old that basically said you put 10% of your money aside, you can retire at 40. Now, it got a couple things materially wrong, one of which was that assumed I made the same money for the 25 straight years. And of course, what I'm making at 40 was very different than what I was making at 16. So I felt like it missed the increase in my appetite over that time.
Yeah.
But I will say I've run the numbers, and by 40, at some point, somewhere between 40 and 45, putting more money in retirement no longer actually made any sense as I looked at it. Anything new I was adding didn't help what was already there compounding, right? Like it had a 10% difference 25 years from now, even if I kept putting the same amount in, because the base was already big enough, in that mode. And so I think that compounding piece is key. And I will also add, I would agree in that thing I say to my wife is like, hey, we had kids. I was maybe 31, 33 for the two different kids. We got married 26, 24. And I was like, we should put more of our money aside in our mid-20s. And she was like, no, it doesn't matter. To this date, I'm like, that extra couple $100,000 that we could have put away in our mid-20s when we had lots of disposable income, I'm like, that would have made paying for college easier. It just would have added like 20, 30% more to our lifestyle today and stress and whatnot than whatever silliness we spent it on, Pottery Barn couches and other nonsense in our 20s.
I love what you alluded to there, Kirk, like lifestyle creep. It's a real thing. And the challenge with it is that like human beings really don't like to feel like they're moving backwards.
Yeah.
What's that old quote that, our mutual friend says, like, a luxury once experienced quickly becomes a necessity. Yeah, it's a very real thing. And being able to maintain the discipline to make sure that you're saving money at an early age. But yeah, that's cool. One of the things that we were kind of spitballing back and forth before we pressed record was you had this very contrarian take in the industry. I remember sitting down with some analysts and, I got invited into the bank that we deal with, and they brought in like, some super smart sounding people, and they were all talking about how many rate cuts we're going to see in 2024. You had a very different perspective on this, I think. David, can you walk us through what your take was, why you had that take? Beyond just the take itself, I'd love to kind of unpack a little bit how you got there and why you came to the conclusions you did. But maybe just first talk us through some of that.
Yeah. So I had the good fortune of being serving universities, some of the best universities in the world, right? And in particular, sitting on the board of advisors for the forecast at the Anderson School at UCLA. So this is one of the best business schools in the entire world, probably the most recognizable brand in the world as well from a university perspective. And we have a lot of conversations with some really smart people, like to your point. And so having those conversations always kind of keep things top of mind. And so I may noodle on these things probably more than the average person. And so I'm not saying we're smart or anything like that. It's just we have more conversations, so more ideation. So you naturally going to be more analytical around these things. But in August of 22, we recognized the liquidity trap that was coming, and we started making adjustments immediately in our lending portfolio and our loan origination process and even our pricing to make sure we start, navigating through this. Now, this has lasted longer than what we anticipated. So we did not expect the tightening cycle to last nearly this long. But as we keep getting new data points, we kept on hearing last year there was going to be a rate cut in the summer and then in the fall. And then even the forecast, as a consensus forecast, there was going to be 7 rate cuts in 24. Now we're down to 2 rate cuts. And the whole time we were looking at the data saying, we don't see in the data how rates are going to go down. What's the reasoning for that decision-making process? And, if you look,
what data would you have been looking for in order to say it's coming?
Great point. So we were looking at pricing across the board. We were looking at CPI, we're looking at the PCE, we're looking at a variety of PPI, right? Core PPI, core CPI. And we're trying to figure out, inflation has to come down or unemployment has to go up in a dramatic fashion in order for the Fed to come in and reduce rates. What is the purpose? What is their dual mandate, right? And that is, stable pricing and stable employment and full employment. Well, full employment has always been defined at 5%. Some say that in the new world, probably 4.5 is probably the more realistic measure. And so we're overemployed and we have inflation. Now, inflation is lower than it was, but there's still inflation, right? So when you're saying 5.4%, yeah, it's better than 9.1, but it's still 5.4. The Fed's target's 2. And so they're going to keep it higher for longer. And we're waiting for it to show up in the data somehow. We're looking for any data points. We looked at housing permits. We looked at car sales. We're looking at any type of metric. We were even looking at qualitative metrics. I had my teams as they were going to restaurants and enjoying their family time, looking at the parking lots of restaurants Sunday through Thursday. Friday, Saturday, they're always going to be busy, but as a parking lot still full Sunday through Thursday, we're not seeing any decline in consumer activity. Now, we do think it's shortened because of the amount of how much debt is fueling this inflation and the current supported pricing where it is today. If you look at across all banks and credit unions, the credit card debt is up 46% year over year through March 31. If you look at our credit card portfolio at University Credit Union, since December 31st, 2019, as an entire program, our credit card balances are up 88%. And then as a per card basis, when you look at the people that had cards with us, our members that had cards with us in 19 till today, it's up 59%. And so it's substantial amount of debt that's being levered. And in my opinion, when you look at it, you look at the transactions, my members, they're not buying additional items. They're paying for the same items they once had. It just costs more. And then they don't have enough money to cover it. And so those balances just accumulate over time. And so I do think that we're coming to a point where we are going to see the slowdown finally happening as that capacity and limitations of money happens. We are watching for credit cards and HELOC consolidations, right? So do we go back to that cycle of people run up the credit card debt, use the home equity as the ATM, cycle back into credit card debt again and trying to outpace it, hoping that raises and bonuses in the future will somehow address their debt? It's unfortunate that this cycle happens over and over and over again. And we're trying to educate our members to making sure that we limit that. But that's when you look at these kind of macro and micro indicators, so micro at the credit union level, we see in our balance sheet well ahead of what any information comes out from the Federal Reserve or even the Bureau of Labor Statistics or any other agency that releases economic data. We get to see a little bit first in the micro data at the credit union, and then we can validate that with the macro data we get from the government. And we just haven't seen a reason for rate reductions. Now, we are seeing the slowing. We are seeing some layoffs, right? We're seeing this kind of rolling recession happen sector by sector. So like tech layoffs happen, financial services happen, mortgages happen, right? So we see all these kind of rolling layoffs, but they're being absorbed so quickly by other areas of the economy that we're just not seeing any type of weakness in employment. And then in addition to that, when you look at the breakdown of non-farm payrolls that's released the first Friday of every month, there you can really see, okay, where are the jobs being created? And, any given time, you're seeing a good chunk of government jobs. So the government's doing a lot of stimulus from hiring, somewhere between 25 and 40% in any given month of the all non-farm payrolls is being created by government. And so those things are issues too, right? And so we have to see a slowdown somewhere before this Fed says, you know what, hey, the economy's weakening. We need to somehow stimulate that with the monetary policy. And in our opinion, fiscal stimulus. And so that's our last point. I know I'm getting long-winded on this one, but fiscal stimulus is another one. So we saw stimulus throughout the pandemic. It's something that historians will say was right or wrong. I think no one's ever been through this before, so we had to do what we had to do, but it has its consequences. But now you're talking about stimulus package after stimulus package after stimulus package. That money keeps flowing in. That is inflation causing, right? So that is going to be more money in the market, chasing fewer goods, and you're going to have continued inflation, which means the Fed can't cut. And there's also like what we call like shadow stimulus kind of happening as well. So like the student loan forgiveness of that debt, when you look at that forgiveness, that's now money that consumers have that can go spend more money. And these are people that are indebted, and historically people who are indebted don't take that additional money and save it. They take that money and spend it. And so again, continuing to force prices higher or sustain prices at a higher level. But across all of this, the one thing I think most people were looking at, like long-term averages, well, they normally tighten it, normally returns around within so many months and so on and so forth. But I think people really underestimate because we didn't have the data, right? It's not baked into the models because it's never happened. But the boomers, right? The boomers are retiring, they've retired, or they're getting close to retirement, and they're definitely the high earnings part of the years. They don't care. When you get in retirement, you don't care what the economy's doing. You saved all your money. You're going to go spend it. You're going to retire and do your activities. And so they're not showing up in the employment data, right? They're not showing up in the wage data. They're not showing up in the hourly earnings data. They're not showing up in the hours work data, but they're still there and they're spending the same amount of money or 70% of the money before they retired. And so there's still that impact as well that's happening. And then you have the wage push inflation happening from Gen X, Gen Z moving into those boomer jobs that are now being vacated for retirement, which are higher earnings, higher salary jobs. And so now you have this wage push inflation effect as well. So really interesting stuff. I mean, I can go on and on. I don't want to like put people to sleep on this one.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack and follow-ups that I kind of want to talk about on this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Money Mavericks. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it.
Stay connected with us on social media and visit our website for exclusive resources, episode transcripts, and more.
Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, making smart moves, and turning your financial dreams into realities.
You've been listening to Money Mavericks, where Mavericks become legends.